If you're anything like me, which I'm guessing you are because you've hit part 6 of this series, you can't get enough of revenge stories. There's just something about hearing tales of terrible people who got what's coming to them that scratches an itch you didn't know you had, especially the ones that go a little too far. And boy, have I got some good ones for you. From plots where terrible bosses have lost everything, to some stories you guys have sent me in yourselves. Strap in as we take a look at even more tales of revenge that went too far. Porch Pirate Revenge. There is nothing, I repeat, nothing more frustrating than having your package pinched from your doorstep. So much so that one couple, who we'll call Amanda and James, decided to take nuclear-level revenge on their porch pirates back in 2022. It was around this time Amanda and James were working long hours to make ends meet, and they didn't have time to cook for their whole family, so they started using a meal delivery service. Once a week, all the meals were delivered in a large box that was left on their porch. But one day, when Amanda got home, the box wasn't there. She rang the company, and they confirmed it had been delivered, but as a gesture of goodwill, they'd deliver another. However, when Amanda went to get that box, it too had vanished. Amanda was devastated. They couldn't afford to just order another. Hungry and annoyed, she began thinking, and thinking turned into plotting. And suddenly, she knew exactly what to do. She still had leftover boxes from the meal delivery company with all their branding on, so she'd make up a special box for the porch pirates as bait. But instead of filling it with delicious meals, she lined the bottom with a few bricks to give it weight, then filled it to the brim with used kitty litter, dirty diapers, some glitter, and her husband even contributed by pooping directly into the box. She then left it on the porch and went to work. When she came back, the box was gone. It was revenge enough knowing she'd ruined the porch pirate's day, but then it got even better. You see, James worked as a mechanic, and later that day, a woman in a pretty nice sedan rolled up to his workshop with her driver's side window busted out. When she got out of the car, he noticed that she smelled bad, like really bad, and that she was covered in a weird combo of cat litter and glitter. In an instant, he figured this lady was the porch pirate who'd been stealing his family's food. She must have opened the box in her car, realized what it was, and then quickly tried to throw the box out the window, but the bricks had tumbled out of the box and shattered the glass. The contents of the box had then spilled all over her car, leaving her in quite the mess. James tried to keep his cool, but when she asked him how much the repairs would be, he quoted her something entirely unreasonable. She was shocked and asked why it was so expensive, to which James replied, "Well, it should make up for all the packages you've stolen off our porch." The woman apparently went white and initially tried to defend herself, but ended up running back to her car and speeding off. And what do you know? Amanda and James never had another package go missing from their porch again. Two birds, one PS5. Now, I've covered some really sneaky and well-plotted means of revenge, but sometimes the most satisfying and nuclear way to go about it is the simplest, according to one Be Amazed viewer called Emma, who sent in their story by email. So, back in 2020, the brand new PlayStation 5 had a limited release around the world, and in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, getting your hands on one was tricky. Plus, they cost around $500, which is not cheap. However, one man, who I'll call Ben, managed to get his hands on one, which his partner Emma saw as kind of expensive, but hey, it made him happy. Not long after, Ben splurged on a new $60,000 BMW. To Emma, this again seemed like a lot, but hey, it wasn't her money, and it made the man she loved happy. But then one day, while they were hanging out in Ben's apartment, he was taking a shower when Emma saw a message pop up on his phone from someone called Jennifer she didn't recognize. but Jennifer's name had a little love heart next to it. Curious, she opened it up and discovered a series of messages that were, I'll just say, adult in nature. Gonna need to use your imaginations here so I don't earn the wrath of YouTube's takedown hammer. Understandably, Emma was crushed, but not as crushed as Ben was about to be. Because instead of waiting to confront Ben or forming a long-term plan to really get her own back, she impulsively grabbed his precious PS5, launched it out of the window directly into the parked BMW below. She then grabbed her stuff and left, all before Ben could get out of the shower. Less than 15 minutes later, Ben was blowing up her phone and screaming at her. His BMW's insurance didn't cover acts of vandalism, and he was still paying it off, so he was now looking at thousands of dollars in damage repair. But instead of admitting to anything, Emma just told him to ask Jennifer to help him pay for everything, seeing how close they were, before hanging up and blocking him. Now, was this the smartest revenge? No. Is it likely Emma faced some repercussions? Probably. But was it satisfying as heck to hear about? Hell yes. Do you have a story of revenge you want to see animated here like Emma's? Then send me an email at revenge@beamazed.com. And you might make it into the next episode. If you can't wait, you can drop it down in the comments below and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. Cool. Now what's next? Boss backfire. We've all had at least one bad boss. Maybe they belittled you, micromanaged you, or tried to get it on with your fiancé. Wait, that last one sounds far-fetched, even for the worst boss in the world. And yet, that's exactly what one Reddit user, who I'll call Zach, faced 1 decade ago. His boss was a grade A sleazebag. Even though he was married to another of Zach's coworkers, he'd regularly cheat on his wife, and even took photos of him cheating in the act that he liked to keep as a collection of creepy trophies. But Zach just kept his head down and tried to mind his own business. Things came to a head one day, though, when his boss learned that Zach was also dating a coworker, and his boss decided to try it on with her. Mortified, she turned him down flat. Clearly, he wasn't used to being told no and pulled some strings that got her fired. Zach was furious, so decided to bide his time to plot his revenge. On occasion, he would discreetly slip into his boss's office, hunting around for anything he might be able to use, when one day, he stumbled across something at the back of a drawer. It was the incriminating photos of his boss in the act. He'd clearly stashed them in the office so that his wife wouldn't find them at home. Without a second thought, Zach took them all. He then waited for his boss to head out on a business trip for a few days, and that's when he anonymously mailed the photos to his boss's wife. Needless to say, she swiftly divorced his ass and, with the clear evidence she had of his infidelity, took him to the cleaners in the divorce settlement. But Zach didn't think he'd suffered enough, because he also made copies of the photos and mailed them to the company's CEO. The biggest nail in his boss's coffin came when the CEO saw his daughter, who also worked at the company, in one of the pictures. Whew. Zach's boss was fired with immediate effect, and with that, the guy's trophy collection became his life-ruining shame. Dev destruction. You know who you should never mess with? Web developers, especially when they know more about the online landscape than you. Case in point, Reddit user Devin was a web developer back in the early 2000s and found himself dealing with one tough customer, who we'll call Bob. Bob sold travel packages and wanted a website in a relatively short space of time. Devin said, "No problem," and asked for an upfront deposit of 25% for all the work he'd need to do. But Bob explained he'd had a bad experience with previous developers and didn't want to pay a deposit. Devin should have probably walked away at this point, but understood Bob had been stung, and so, like a real gent, agreed to do the work without a deposit. For 2 months, Devin worked night and day to get the website, which was something like bobstravel.com, up on time. When it was ready, Bob asked for him to transfer the site to his own server to test it. The next day, Devin suddenly found himself unable to log into the server. He tried to get a hold of Bob, but all his emails and calls went unanswered. That's when he saw it. BobsTravel.com was live. Bob had scammed him. Devin tried contacting him for days, and eventually Bob responded saying simply, "I'm never going to pay you, and there's nothing you can do about it," and hung up. Devin was out of pocket. But he was also out for revenge. Instead of trying to get the old website taken down, he made a new website, BobsTravelSucks.com. And because Devin understood how to get websites to rank better than Bob, it took a matter of days before this website appeared in the #1 spot in every search engine out there for anyone looking for Bob's business. But what was on this website? Screenshots of all the emails he and Bob had shared, a full account of the way he'd been swindled, and a warning for everyone to stay away from his business. Devin then moved on, forgetting about his ploy for a few months, until he got a letter from a solicitor's firm telling him to take the website down. But after a quick Google, Devin saw it was fake. Bob was clearly desperate, but couldn't get an actual lawyer on the matter because he'd stolen the website in the first place, and Devin clearly had proof. And so Devin let him squirm. He was getting emails through from people who'd been scammed by Bob, and he also added them to the website, making Bob look even worse. Then one day, Bob called him. He pleaded with Devin to take the site down. It was costing him his business, and he was now being investigated by the Travel Agency Association because of it all. He said he'd pay Devin what he owed. But Devin had his response ready. "I'm never taking the website down, and there's nothing you can do about it." And then he hung up. Within a month, Bob's business, which was apparently now hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, went completely bust, and he never worked in travel ever again. Moral of this story: don't mess with a dev. They have the digital power to ruin your life. Playing with plagiarism. In esteemed universities all over the world, there's no greater sin than plagiarism. This is the act of taking someone else's work and passing it off as your own. These days, sophisticated anti-plagiarism tools are used to help crack down on people copying work, like one student attending Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences back in 2022 found out. She had submitted answers from a paper she'd submitted and failed the previous year. She was suspended for 2 semesters and had to fight a charge of academic misconduct, which she eventually won. I mean, she plagiarized herself, not exactly stealing from anyone else, but I understand the punishment. Lesson learned, eh? Well, Sandra Borch, Norway's higher education minister, definitely didn't think so, and sought to humiliate the student further by taking the case all the way up to the Supreme Court to appeal the verdict. A lot of students felt this was really unfair, but Sandra was adamant it was essential for those with a higher education to prove they had honestly conducted their work. And that's where, in 2024, Christopher Ritterager, a student from Oslo, stepped in. Considering how Sandra was acting holier than a saint, Christopher decided to look at Sandra's own master's thesis she'd submitted 10 years ago. And boy, was this saint one hell of a sinner. Christopher found over 20% of her thesis had been stolen from other scholars, word for word. So, what did he do? Did he write her a polite letter showing her what he'd found to convince her to drop the lawsuit? Or take it to the university to let them decide? No. He called her out and posted it online for the entire world to see. He even highlighted the sections she'd blatantly stolen side by side with the original papers, so there was no mistake. Had he done it subtly, Sandra might have had the opportunity to drop the lawsuit and reevaluate her attack. But once the media got hold of it, it became indefensible, and Sandra was raked over the coals. Overnight, she had to resign from her position as higher education minister, a job she'd spent a decade trying to secure. Her entire doctorate was pulled into question, and she may now be at the center of her own academic misconduct lawsuit that could cost her entire future. Now that's a revenge story that's going to be hard to copy. Married at First Lie. Parents can do a lot for their kids, which they don't always appreciate, which is what one Reddit user, who I'll call Terry, discovered back in 2022. Terry and her wife had bought a large 4-bedroom house in Pennsylvania as a second home, which their son lived in as he went to college in the state. He didn't pay any rent or taxes, just utilities and groceries, a pretty dreamy setup for any student. He then met a girl, the pair got engaged, and she moved in with him. His parents didn't have any problems with this and decided to throw a little barbecue at the house so both families could meet. The barbecue seemed to be going well until suddenly, Terry's wife came over in tears and told her they both needed to leave. Only when they got back home did she reveal that they'd apparently been uninvited from the wedding. Yeah, her son and fiancé had told her that Terry's family just weren't their kind of people, and to prevent them from embarrassing the rest of her family, they'd been uninvited from the wedding. The rest of her family had backed his fiancé up, and so, confused and horribly embarrassed, Terry's wife had left. Terry was furious, and understandably so, because what they clearly meant by not their type of people was lesbians. Seething with anger, Terry called up her son, and he confirmed what her wife had said, and worse, that he agreed with her before hanging up. Her own son had chosen a bunch of homophobes over the parents that had loved and raised him? Wow. Now Terry is a bigger person than I will ever be, because instead of taking revenge immediately, she waited a week for things to calm down. Then, like an adult, she drove over to the Pennsylvania house to talk to her son face to face. She walked in the door, but her son wasn't there. However, his fiancé's entire family was. Inexplicably, they had all moved into the house. Her house. But now they were screaming at her, telling her to leave their house. What was going on? It turned out they thought her son owned the property, and now, after working to separate him from his real family, had taken it upon themselves to move in. That was when Terry lost it. She told them all that they had 30 days to get out of her house or she'd evict them, including her son, and then left, before listing the house for sale. A few hours later, her son rang, asking her why she was selling, get this, his house. Terry explained that since he didn't see his parents in his new life, she didn't see him living in the house that those same parents had bought and paid for. And just like he'd done to her, she hung up. Over the next week, her son bombarded her phone, begging her to change her mind, having finally realized how badly he'd messed up. But Terry was resolute. At the end of the 30-day notice, Terry, true to her word, sold the house, and the family was evicted. The son's fiancé quickly broke off the engagement, apparently realizing he didn't actually have any money or assets, and ghosted him. Broke, single, and homeless, he literally begged his moms to let him come back home. Last I saw, Terry was still weighing up whether or not to let him come back. Personally, I wouldn't want such an ungrateful pig under my roof, but what would you have done? Let me know down in the comments below. The old switcheroo. Finding out your partner is cheating on you really sucks, but you know what can make it worse? When they cheat on you with their ex. Trust me, nothing hurts like it. And so, what I'm going to say about this next story is that it was entirely justified. If anything, maybe it didn't go far enough. But I'll let you be the judge. So, back in 2015, an anonymous Reddit user, who I'll call Michelle, was living with her husband, David. She was a teacher, and David was a lawyer. And while they both worked long hours, they'd been happily married for 4 years, or so Michelle thought. She and David had a car that hooked up to their phone's Bluetooth, allowing them to have messages read out loud while they were driving. Michelle had just dropped David off at a bar for a night with the boys when the Bluetooth device clocked a message that had been received from David's phone. Confused, Michelle looked and saw that David had left his phone on the passenger seat. She was about to drive back to the bar to give it to him when the message was read out, and it was, raunchy. Emma's heart dropped out of her stomach, so she stopped the car and looked at the phone. The message had come from his ex. They'd been messaging, well, let's say charged things back and forth, apparently for months. Emma was heartbroken, but she wasn't stupid. She drove back to the bar, found David, handed him his phone, and pretended she knew nothing. But when he got home later that night and passed out drunk, she enacted revenge by taking pictures of all the messages and then swapping the numbers of his ex and his phone with his boss's. So when he went to work the next day, he was none the wiser. Emma, on the other hand, had called into work feigning sickness and spent the morning packing up all her stuff and then left to go and stay with her parents. At about midday, she got a call. It was David. He was distraught. His boss had fired him on the spot for gross misconduct, effective immediately. It was so unfair. He didn't know what he'd done wrong. Emma tried to stop herself laughing through the phone. He must have tried to send his ex a risque message that morning, and his boss had got it instead. Then she dropped the bomb of a lifetime by asking, "Could it have anything to do with your ex?" David acted confused at first. Then Emma told him she had evidence of his infidelity, and she wanted him out of their house by the end of the week, and that she wanted a divorce. By the time she was done, he was homeless, jobless, and wifeless. Oh, what I wouldn't have given to be there when David realized who he sent his last rounds of raunchy messages to. Prime revenge. Were you one of those kids that was bullied in school, and their parents insisted on trying to help by going to the principal, which just made you an even bigger target? Yeah, tackling bullying in a way that doesn't make everything worse is really hard, which one mother in Texas discovered back in March 2024. It was around this time she noticed that her 10-year-old son was being bullied by another boy in his class. He would apparently steal her son's stuff all the time. And this came to a head when one day he brazenly snatched her son's bottle of Prime from his hands and drank it in front of him. Okay, that's pretty jerkish behavior, but when her son told his mom what had happened, she was so mad that she decided to take matters into her own hands. The next day, she gave another bottle of Prime to her son and told him, "Give it to the bully." Well, that's not exactly revenge, that's actually pretty kind, considering. So the kid did as he was asked, and during their gym class, he offered the bully the drink. Thinking that being a huge jerk got results, the bully gleefully gulped it down and immediately regretted it. He suddenly felt incredibly sick, clutching his stomach and collapsing to the ground, wailing like a baby until he was taken to the hospital. All eyes then turned to the son, who told them his mom had specifically instructed he give it to the bully. The police were then called, and the mom admitted she had actually filled the bottle with a mixture of salt, vinegar, lemon juice, and Gatorade. It was apparently a non-toxic combination, but enough to send the kid to the hospital, which he deserved for bullying her son. But the police didn't see it that way. She was arrested and charged with injuring a child. Wow. So not only did this go too far, but we've all learned that apparently Prime tastes indistinguishable from that gross concoction. The more you know. A real shame. Shaming someone for who they are doesn't sit right with me ever. But some religious families will stop at nothing to shame their kids into being something they're not. Like this next Reddit user was, who I'll call Billy. While Billy was raised in a strict Christian household, he realized he was actually an atheist. He didn't believe in God. His parents really didn't like this, but what they hated more was that Billy was also gay. When he told them this, his mother said he'd burn in hell, and his father told him to just be straight. Wow. So both idiots and assholes. Incredible. One day, his mother dragged him to see a local pastor to see if together they could pray the gay away. Not how that works, but it gets worse. When they got home, it turned out his mother had arranged a kind of surprise intervention because all his close friends and family members were there. Billy hadn't come out to anyone else, hoping to keep it private, but his mother had told everyone. And for hours, they chanted Bible verses at him and prayed for him to get better. Okay, first off, being gay isn't an illness. Also, you don't get to choose, so this wasn't just ignorant, but also incredibly humiliating for Billy. He was furious, but not as furious as his father was at his mother. You see, his father was the mayor of a small town they lived in, and if word got out that his son was gay, his conservative reputation would be ruined, which would mean he wouldn't be re-elected in the next few months. Now, Billy didn't openly advertise that he was gay, as in he wasn't wearing rainbow colors or smooching other guys in public. It just wasn't his thing. However, there was going to be a small pride parade in town, so he decided, in revenge, it was time to camp it up. On the day of the parade, he got dressed up in the goofiest, most revealing rainbow clothes he could find, joined the parade, and then proceeded to flaunt what his mama gave him in the most outlandish ways possible. If the people in his small town didn't know he was gay before, they definitely did now. He heard gasps and saw people pointing, but he didn't care. As the rally moved past the town hall, he could see his father, who clocked him, and suddenly looked horrified. To top it off, Billy posted photos from journalists covering the event and even gave an interview. The news spread like wildfire. His dad's reputation was destroyed, and he ended up losing his re-election campaign after his equally ignorant supporters turned their back on him. His mother was ostracized from most church activities, as well as her job in the church, forcing them to move a few months later. Billy, on the other hand, went to college, cut his parents off, began living his best life, and never had to speak to them again. Now that's a coming out story. Do you have a story for the next part of this series? Remember to email me at revenge@beamazed.com. And as always, thanks for watching.